Will game collecting ever die out? Will we ever look back on buying these old hunks of plastic as just a fad? Or even not just these hunks of plastic, moving into a digital age? Will we see collecting PlayStation 4, Switch titles, Xbox One? Will we see that as something that was really weird to do when even now we can buy it all digital? Why are we buying physical still in 2017 when we have this other option? And the future is moving towards making everything digital. It seems like eventually all these companies are going to stop doing physical releases. I mean, GameStop's starting to close down stores because physical releases aren't making money like they used to. A lot of people are starting to opt towards the digital market. So going back to the very first thing I said when this video started, will game collecting eventually die out? This is another question brought to you by Casey, a Patreon of mine. As per my Patreon page, I have a tier where you can suggest a video for me to make once a month, and this one was suggested by Casey. And honestly, Casey knocks these topics out of the park every time, and I'm really excited to talk about this today. I have a lot of things to cover as far as, do I think the retro game bubble will ever burst, and do I think we will keep collecting physical moving into the future? But without making this intro any longer, let's get started. Now, honestly, this is one of them topics that as soon as you get me started on it, I could go in a million different directions and I don't even know where I would end up. I don't know what I would talk about first or what my conclusion to talking about that thing would be. It's a whole mess in my head. So I'm gonna try my best to put a bunch of stuff on the table here for you guys and then give my opinion at the end. I'm gonna take this in two parts. I'm gonna take this in current day, where we are now and where it's heading into the immediate future, but also talk about retro game collecting, because that is something that I am so big into. And honestly, I feel like retro game collecting ties into why so much of us still collect physical games now. So I'm going to start with the retro game bubble burst, because it's something that I've never talked about before and I want to give my 2 cents on it, and it does kind of directly relate to the topic. Now, I've never claimed to be a smart man's. I've never said that I'm great at sciences and maths, so take everything I say with a pinch of salt. I do not think that there will be a retro game bubble burst to the point where all of these games that we're collecting, all these games that we see with these high price tags, all just game values in general, I don't think one day we're gonna wake up and they're gonna be, I don't even think it's gonna be a slow thing where one day they're not worth anything. And there's so many reasons that tie into it, but really the solid point that I have, and it goes into so many other things too, but the solid point is, for there to be a bubble burst in anything, in any kind of market, something big needs to happen. Like, for example, when it comes to retro video games, and if the bubble will burst, the only way that that will burst is if suddenly there is just a huge influx of stock on the market that drives down the price because there's no competition and there's just too much out there and people can't sell it, because no matter how many people want this game, there's more than enough to satisfy everyone's supply and demand. So the only way that could happen is if almost simultaneously, almost every collector sells their whole collections and they're like, I'm done. I'm done with collecting. I'm never gonna do it again. And everyone did that in like a span of, like, let's say 6 months. So suddenly all these people have stopped collecting and all of their collections are back on the market. That would cause a burst, but it would have to be so extreme. It would have to be so many people getting rid of all of their stuff and no one wanting to buy it anymore, or there being too much of it for people left that want it. It's just not something that's going to happen. So it seems so ludicrous that would happen, right? So it's not something that I could foresee happening. And in my opinion, that is the only way a bubble could actually burst. Because let's say one day we wake up and somehow magically all the prices are dropped. What's going to happen? What's going to be the first thing that happens? Everyone is going to start buying because we want this stuff in our collections. Finally, Earthbound's $10. See if you can find one, because as soon as Earthbound or any game like that hits a low price, people are going to be buying, and there's not going to be nearly enough to supply demand. And what's going to happen? The reseller's like, why am I selling this for $10 again? Let's make it 100. So unless we all collectively decide that we don't care anymore, that we don't want anything to do with it, it's not going to happen. And you could ask almost every collector what their opinion on, if a bubble burst was to happen, if it was for whatever reason to happen, what's almost every collector or gamer or retro gamer going to say? That's awesome, because now I can buy all this stuff super cheap. It's like, no, we're not gonna all be like, oh, if they're not worth anything, then I don't want any part of it. The reason why so much of us collect is because we love it. We want it in our collections. We want to hold it and treasure it and almost make a museum with it. And 10, 20 years from now, we can play it again. It's just capitalizing the past. There's so many reasons why all of us collect, But as soon as a bubble bursts, we're all gonna jump on that and we're just gonna drive the prices straight back up again. It's never gonna happen. So I really do feel like as far as retro game collecting goes, there's never gonna be a bubble burst. So hand in hand with there not being a bubble burst, it means that we're always gonna be collecting. I don't think you can take the collector out of most of us. I know me, I'm gonna be a collector for the rest of my life. I really slowed down right now because it's so hard to collect in 2017, especially where I live. But if for some reason there was like huge influx and video games everywhere, you bet I would be collecting again. And I'm gonna do it into my late 40s, 50s, 60s. If I go to a garage sale when I'm 70 years old and I see little Samson, do you think I'm not gonna pick that up? So as far as retro game collecting goes, that's something that I don't think will ever die out. As long as, I mean, so many of us are still so young too, right? Like I grew up on NES and I'm only in my late 20s. So I've got years ahead of me to still buy this stuff. As far as retro game collecting goes, that's not gonna die out. That does kind of doesn't lead into the current state of situations, because really, as much as I would love to keep collecting, I mean, I have over 50 PS4 games, I'm buying all the Switch games I can, I have 25, 30 odd Wii U games. I would love to keep collecting physical, I don't like buying digital, but that's not something that might be in my control. I'm pretty sure when Microsoft announced the Xbox One, initially, it was kind of half announced as being a completely digital system, and there was not going to be physical games, and then everyone had an outcry saying we want physical, and so they catered more towards physical, even though the games still really don't even run off the disc anymore. They just install into the system and the disc pretty much just boots them up half the time. It was definitely a sign of a first step towards we are moving towards a digital age, and it's not just because these companies want that to happen, which obviously they do, because the production cost is way less. If you can make a game and just put it out there on the internet and people buy it, that's way cheaper and easier than making a bunch of physical things and spending money on a huge production line of physical games. I mean, that's why it's so much easier for indie game developers to make video games, and they don't have to worry about all that production cost. They just make a video game. So if these big companies can cut a buck anywhere they can, that's a big buck to cut. So of course they want to move towards digital. That makes perfect sense, but it's not just them. There is so many people that want to move in that direction, so many gamers that want to move in that direction. Maybe not a majority of people watching this channel, because I'm a collector and I'm sure a lot of you are here because we are all collectors. I do know a lot of people that prefer buying digital. It's easier. I admit that it is easier. You can buy it whenever you want. You don't have to leave the house. It downloads straight to the system. You don't have to switch cartridges or discs every time you want to play another game. Really, it makes more sense. So there are more people jumping on board with it, and companies want that to happen, and GameStops are closing down because more people are jumping on board with it. And we're moving towards a future that is gonna definitely be that way. I don't see it not being that way. I mean, we could all petition and cry out and hope and plead, and I'm sure Nintendo will be the last ones going strong as far as making physical things, but I'm sure even Nintendo would love to cut down on that cost too. But there's always gonna be those that want to still buy PlayStation 4, Xbox One, Switch games, NES games. There's always gonna be those of us that wanna collect what we can when it comes to physical. So it really depends which way you look at it. Is collecting physical gonna die out? I think so, in the sense of not being able to do it with future games, because you're not gonna have the option. I think it's definitely going that way, and it's gonna become more and more bleak. I really hope that it doesn't, but I think that it will. Maybe not in the next 5 years or 10 years, but if we're talking 20 years from now, I'll be surprised if they're not doing all digital by that point, with very few having physical releases. But as far as taking the retro game collectors or taking the game collecting mindset out of so many of us, everything that has ever had a physical will be collected for as long as all of us right now are gamers, and that's going to be a long time in the future. There isn't going to be a huge bubble burst when it comes to the retro games, because there's no incentive or reason for it to happen. We're all stubborn collectors that are going to keep collecting. At least I know I am. I know how I feel. I'm going to always opt for physical. I'm always going to want to dive back in 10, 20 years from now and try and finish my PS4 library when it gets a little cheaper, or even before it starts getting more expensive. But this is just my opinion. For example, as I said, I don't know much about economics and business, and maybe there's something I'm missing on this bubble burst thing that someone hasn't pointed out to me that could actually happen, or something that none of us have foreseen that could actually happen. Do you guys have any theories? Could there be a bubble burst on retro video game collecting? And what do you think about moving into the future? Will we see physical games slowly die out and it become digitally focused? I'm pretty sure that's the way I think it's gonna go, but how do you think it's gonna go? Do you think all of us are gonna be way too stubborn and way too demanding from these companies to keep physical going? Let me know your opinions down below. Remember to like this video, Be subscribed if you're not already. Huge thank you to Casey from Patreon for recommending this video. And hey, if you want to join Patreon, there are so many other perks you can get, like a Patreon Skype call. You can join in the Discord chat and the Facebook chat. You can get editing tips. You can get a whole bunch of stuff. Go look over on the Patreon page because I add way too much. And there's some really cool stretch goals that I would love to get to, because it means more content and more fun for everyone. But I love all of you guys. I love not only all my Patreons, but all the people that watch these videos. And whether you're a retro gamer, a new age gamer, a physical collector, or a digital collector, hey, it's video games. Let's play them and have some damn fun. Just having my damn fun. And I'll see you in the next video. Who got that, by the way?